Soledad, welcome back to the show, my queen. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here otra vez and that your podcast is out here living, breathing. Ooh, so excited.
Thank you so much. And congratulations to you. You have a brand new podcast. We're going to talk all about that. And I brought you here because, as you may know, we're doing a series on the business of babies and entrepreneurship. And you are a prime example of somebody who is doing it all and also empowering women, mothers, people who want to financially thrive, but not just in the traditional sense, right? It's not just about the numbers in the bank. You're really about like the holistic approach of self-care. And I love the way that you talk about it from the financial lens. So just give us a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and we'll dive right into this conversation.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Rita-Soledad Fernández Paulino. You can call me Soledad. I am a money and self-care coach at my company, Para Todos. And I'm really focused on helping Black and Indigenous people of color, women, and LGBTQ plus folk get to the point where they're working because they want to, not because they have to, and having them like gain financial security through self-care. I personally believe that the way that you reach financial security from a place of joy and not like hustle and stress is by learning how to engage in the 7 types of self-care.
I love that. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say that this was not something that you grew up embodying, especially from the lens of maybe watching the women in your life. What did you associate with mothering and with finances as a kid?
Oh, such a good question. You're completely correct that it is not something that was modeled for me. I actually remember when I first started like even learning about self-care, one of my tias said self-care is selfish. And that is kind of like a big thing that kind of stayed in my head a lot when I was like, no, but I kind of feel like I need to take care of myself because I don't know how I'm going to burn out just from motherhood. That's literally what I thought when I first had my child. And people really around me was like, no, once you have a kid, everything, your life becomes your child. And that was really what was promoted to me. And I remember like growing up, my mom had a full-time job. She was a single mom and she got a master's at one point. And I remember not even realizing like, oh, like she works. And she said to me, like, if you're a good mom, your child shouldn't even know that you have a job. So if you could imagine, like when I first started Wealth Para Todos, and I still have this habit now, I work on the business like early hours. And it's because I had this idea that my children weren't supposed to, like my children were supposed to think that my life revolved around their life. I remember one day when my now 10-year-old, I think they were 5, and they were like, wait, you're Wealth Para Todos? And I was like, yeah, I'm Wealth Para Todos. And then like, so you have a company? And I was like, yeah. And instead of I felt like, oh man, I must be talking about the business too much. Then now my child found out. Like it was crazy pants compared to where and how I live my life now.
That's wild. Can you think about like what are some of the things that your mom did to make you think that she didn't have a job? Like was she just omnipresent all the time? And like how do you hide that?
Well, like it's like a weird thing because it's like I knew that she worked, but like she was a teacher at the school that I attended. So I just kind of always thought like, oh, she's volunteering.
I mean, that's a very logical thought process, right? Because I mean, what entity in the world is more like self-sacrificing than a mother, right? So if it's, of course you're going to assume that she's just here because she has nothing better to do.
And also, I mean, I grew up in a community where a lot of like the Latina moms weren't working. And part of the reason why my mom was because she was a single mom. So I also wonder like how much of my brain didn't want to like accept that I was a child of divorced parents, and we create coping mechanisms. And at the same time, like my mom is somebody who would have loved to be a stay-at-home mom. Like she's helped me so much with raising my kids. Like she's so good with babies and really, like I remember she used to tell me like, you're so lucky que no tienes que trabajar, that it's, you know, like it's a choice. And I remember for me feeling guilty because I was like, but I do want to work. And yes, I signed up to become a parent. I always knew I wanted to be a parent since I was young, but I always imagined myself working too. I just thought being a parent was one part of my identity, but I was still going to be an amiga. I would still do my part in making the world a better place. I still wanted to have a good sex life, like so many things beyond just being a parent.
Well, I think that's a kind of a radical thought process to have even at a young age, because it's not necessarily something that, again, is modeled for us typically. You know, when I think of the quote unquote traditional Latina mothers that I was raised by, aunts, grandmothers, my own mom, there was none of this like self expression in the world. There was none of this like, I'm going to have hobbies and like, it's funny because I think about even now, my sister and I are grown and my dad has like hobbies. My father plays golf. He does woodwork, whatever. He like, that's just always been a thing. He just always does things. Like as a man, I think it's very normal to have like hobbies. Whereas like the woman or the mom, it's like my mom didn't have hobbies when I was growing up at all. I got her into Zumba, like as an adult, like when I took her to a Zumba class and now she does that. But there's just never been a focus on having a separate identity outside of your role as a parent. And I'm curious for you, like, have you gotten pushback from family members that are like, you're not being like mom enough because you have these other things that you give a shit about?
100%. I had one thing tell me that I was a bad mom because I wasn't signing up my kid for swim classes.
How do you react to that?
I was like shocked. And at the same time, I remember saying, like, well, if you drive my child to swimming classes, then they can go to swimming classes. My partner doesn't drive. So if there's any driving around with the kids, that involves me. Or eventually, like, and I did get to the point where I was able to hire a nanny and got support and for my kids to do that. Or even now within my business where I block off my schedule so that I can, I actually want to be there for their extracurricular activities. I like to do their homework, but I've gone through phases and I had to allow myself to go through these different phases based on my energy levels and also my time and my money. I love now that at 5 o'clock, I'm the one doing the homework with my children, but there was a time where it was my mom. And there was also a time where it was a nanny. And I had to sit with the desire to want to be the one doing the homework. I'm a former teacher. So like having anyone else talk math with my child was like, oh, that like, there's so many ways that we could talk about numbers. That's not the only way, like it was hard for me, but I had to have patience and faith that it was just a season. And I had to be able to think long term what I wanted for my children. And I remember sacrificing when I had my second child and getting a job that required me like to travel and doing consultation work. And it was good money. And I was there having to like do the pump in like a closet and I'd get like engorged and I'm, carrying all this milk around as I'm going on a plane back and forth and freezing milk because I was like, oh my goodness, my part of what I was also told was like, you have to breastfeed your child. You have to give them milk. So I'm doing the mostest with making sure this child always has milk. And it was so challenging. And I remember just telling myself, it's temporary. This is just a temporary season. And then also getting to the point, and I breastfed like my second child way too long, Denise. That kid used to like walk up to me, pull down my shirt, and just like start drinking milk from me.
Ain't nobody got time, sis. Ain't nobody got time. Holy shit.
Yeah. And like for anyone who's ever breastfed, like that alone is a part-time job.
That's a multi-six-figure job, okay?
Yeah, and it's hard. And I'm like somebody, I always say, like, in the past life, I must have been like the village cow because I created so much milk. I had so much milk all the time. And like, even after I stopped breastfeeding, if I was at a store and a baby started to cry, pew, 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 milk would shoot out of me.
You're lucky because I had the complete opposite experience. I tried breastfeeding for like 2 weeks. I was like, this is for the birds, okay? Like I'm out here fucking struggling to pump an ounce and I've been here for 30 minutes. Ain't nobody got time, okay? And I did walk into the motherhood journey like very much clear that my child needs to be fed. And it will happen in whatever way. And I'm not going to like absorb the internet and social media and my family and friends, like fucking toxic narratives around like breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. Like we're not doing all that. I was always very clear too that I don't want to be the sole person who can feed her. I want my partner to be able to feed her. I want my mom to be able to feed her. I want the night nurse to be able to feed her. And no, you're not waking me up at 3 a.m. to pump. Like, we're not doing that shit because mom needs to sleep. Okay. Mom loves you, but mom also needs to pay the bills. And, I think obviously, I think a function of that is the fact that I am an older mom. And so I've had like practice in not making other people's expectations what I need to make my own expectations. But also, it's just like, you got to get so clear about boundaries in general as a mother. And I think even the journey of pregnancy made me like so okay with telling people, like, back the fuck up. Didn't ask for that opinion. Don't need it. Don't want it. And I'm curious for you if you have had that experience in motherhood where it's made you more confident in the self advocacy in a way that maybe you weren't before you became a mom.
Oh, for sure. And I think like for me, for a millennial, I feel like I had my kids young, I had my first kid at 28. So like millennial standards, that's young.
Well, it's also because we can't afford anything anymore, including children. So, it's fine.
So I had my kids young, and it's also part of the reason why I'm always thinking like, oh, am I gonna have 2 more kids?
Girl, you better sit your
I
ass down.
wonder. I know you're always like, get a dog. But there's a part of me that's like, I wonder what motherhood, which I always like refer to as parenthood, would feel like at this time in my life with this level of financial security, with this level of just like understanding who I am. I think I struggled a lot with boundaries and advocating for myself and really understanding what was right for me. Like I had to hold a lot of space for this conflict of like, everyone's going to talk shit to me. Everyone's going to say something to me. And I would just hold it in and then be like sad about it later or thinking about it later. That was like a lot of my early years of parenthood. And it wasn't until my first child was around probably 2. And I started to see like that they were not identifying with their their sex at birth. And they started like, just being a lot more gender fluid and seeing my child just walk into spaces and really be themselves completely and how protective I was of my child. And I was so quick to set any boundaries with anybody who was trying to tell me like your kid shouldn't be wearing a dress or you need to teach your child how to be a boy. Like I was so quick to set boundaries there that it made me realize, why don't I do that for myself? And that's when I started therapy.
Yeah, no, that's real. I think that's so real because it feels like it's easier to do it for other people. But when it comes to you, I think it's very common for us to feel almost just like, well, I don't want to upset people. I don't want to ruffle feathers. And, a lot of us first gen daughters are like people pleasers. We have a lot of inherited trauma that manifests itself in real ways. I want to know from you, since you mentioned having your kids younger, and that you wonder like what the experience would be like now that you're in a different place financially. What was your life like financially back when you were a new mom?
Crazy, because I was 28 years old I was 27 actually, I think. Yeah, I was 27 when I got pregnant. No, I don't know.
It's all a blur.
Yes. Living in New York City. When I like had this dream that I should move back to LA, we had already started to set up the nursery in New York City. And I just had this dream, like, go back to LA, go back to LA. And so then I was like, I think I should go back to LA. And then I just wrote all these numbers down on a piece of paper and I drew a number and I was like, okay, that's where I'm buying my flight ticket to go back to LA. The day before I left to LA, I had a visit with a doctor and they said to me that I had placenta previa and that I needed to be on bed rest because the placenta previa just means like your placenta's low. And so when you're walking a lot, as the baby develops, you'll start to bleed. And it's the reason why a lot of people die during childbirth. When your placenta comes out first, you'll bleed to death. And so the day before I'm leaving to LA, I find out that I have this. I leave to LA. Now I'm on bed rest. I'm thinking I'm going to move in to my mom's house, right? I was like, I had no plan, Janice. I had no plan about like what we were going to do for work, where we were going to live. But I was like, we'll live at my mom's house. I get to my mom's house and it's in no condition for us to be there. Anyone else who's like Latino might know, like our parents can be hoarders, okay? So there's no space for my pregnant self or my partner to move in there. And now we're like, where are we going to live? And we're looking for like places that we could kind of like afford. I did have some savings, but I was also being told like, you can't work. You have to be put on like bed rest. Husband moves cross country, needs to find a job. We ended up living in my best friend's parents' basement, where I shared a bed with my best friend and my partner was on the sofa. That's where I spent all of my pregnancy.
Wow.
Yeah, so kind of like in some ways homeless.
No, for real. I think that's called like couch surfing nowadays. They've made it trendy.
And that was my pregnancy, and then I had my child, and then we moved into like a rental and we had like our own little space. But yeah, the financial insecurity that I faced while having my first child, I didn't even know, Janice, that I was financially insecure. That I think is just more of like what I've been exposed to in terms of my life, like other people. I knew other people who had similar experiences. So where I think like some people think like, oh yeah, one day you go and you buy a house and you reach the milestone of having, like your own backyard. For me, it was like, oh, there are times when you go live with your parents. Like that was so normal for me and acceptable to me. And also just like housing insecurity was something that I saw often in LA, a high cost living area, also in New York City, a high cost living area. It's crazy, but it was kind of like my milestone of adulthood.
So you have your first child, you have your second. At what point were you motivated to start your business, and what was that spark for you?
Years later, Denise. Like I would love to say, like I do think I had my first child, and there was a moment where I was like, oh my goodness, like we need to get our finances together. Like we need to figure this stuff out. Like maybe we should buy a house because it's like very common, like first gen. And I started to look at learning about budgeting, and I started looking at our expenses. And then my abuelo passed away, and I was so sad. I was so depressed, really, that I took $10,000 that we had like started to save and spent it in 3 months. I like paid for a field trip for my students to go to from LA to San Diego. Everyone went to San Diego Zoo. I paid for a bus. My classroom that year was like so Pinterest beautiful, but it was just like all this money spending on really my classroom and having snacks. And I just made my workspace very comfortable for me as I was, because I didn't know at that time, that version of me didn't even know how to cry, Janice. I couldn't even allow myself to feel grief. I knew like, oh, I'm sad, pues ponte a trabajar, para de llorar, ponte a trabajar. Like that was what was so ingrained in me. So much so that husband even thought I was having an affair because he was like, how are you working so much? I already have like one child, getting pregnant with my second child. So I started to think I was going to get into finances, kind of interested in like this whole idea of generational wealth, but then grief took over and then life took over. It was getting pregnant with my second child that gave me a little like, oh, life is going to go on. But even then, I wasn't thinking about finances. Things got really bad for me in 2019. That story's on the podcast when I got sick, and then I'm on medical leave, and husband had to shut down his company. That's when I started to budget. To start my business, like it's kind of tricky because I started a community in 2020 on Instagram. I wasn't thinking I was building a business. I was literally like, I need people who I need to talk dinero with. Like I need to find people who are about this life. And this life being like budgeting, investing in the stock market, learning to max out retirement accounts, thinking about leaving dinero behind for loved ones, right? Like that's what I was really searching for, a community of people like that. So that's why I started my Wealth Para Todos account on Instagram. And then people like started coming my way. I'm like, oh, can you teach? Can you coach me? Can you teach me this? And I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, no, I'm a teacher. No, yeah, I'll do this for free. And I coached people in 2020 for free. Then there was like speaking engagements. And I was like, okay, but very like, I look at my journaling from back then and I had thoughts of like, Janice says I could start my own business. Janice doesn't have kids. Like I really in my head was looking for all these reasons of why I couldn't pursue entrepreneurship. And I remember like looking at other people and really thinking like, yeah, but they don't have kids. But they don't have kids. Like I was using my kids a lot as an excuse. And then it got to a point where I was a little like resentful because there was a part of my heart that wanted to explore and take risk and build a business. But in my mind, I'm also thinking like, how the hell am I going to take care of my kids, start a business? Oh, I'm going to like make money, but it's just going to pay for childcare. So then I could actually be in the business. Like, and I felt very uncomfortable about relying on my partner financially, not because he was like some crazy machista, but more because of my own hyper independence issues. So like, it just was very hard for me to imagine that possibility. And then in September of 2021, I was turning 35 years old, and I was like, all right, I got to figure something out. Either like I go get a job or I start the business, but I need to do something. Like, I'm kind of bringing in some money from here, but I wasn't even using the money. Like, I would bring money and just put it in the savings account. And so at that point I had like made $30,000 just just from like random opportunities that kept coming my way from my Instagram account. I was just saying, yes, sure, I'll create content for you. Sure, yeah, I could do that speaking engagement. And it was just there, but $30,000 wasn't going to be enough to like cover childcare or really like contribute to my household. And so it was like I made some money, but it wasn't money that was going to be like, in my mind, I was like business money. And then I had this opportunity where somebody said, hey, it was a financial company. And they said, hey, we have this job. It pays $65,000 a year. Would you run our social media account? And I thought, 65,000, that's what I made as a teacher. I love teaching. Am I going to love doing social media for somebody else? Full-time hours? Oh, I don't really know. Oh, but I'll be able to work from home. And I said to them, you know what? I'll do your social media and your podcast for 120. And they said, okay, you just have to close Wealth Para Todos. And then I was like, no, I'm going to make 6 figures with Wealth Para Todos. I hired Counselor Carmen as my business coach. And within, I think it was like 10 months later, I hit 6 figures.
Wow. 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 Okay. So let's dive into so many parts of this story because it's incredible. First off, what did you do to get rid of the block around having children and starting a business?
I think what helped me with that was that husband and I got into a huge fight. And this was like the beginning of where we were going to start marriage counseling. But in this big fight, I said to him, like, we had kids and my life changed dramatically for the worse. You had kids and you made more money and you've had like you're getting promotions and you're just like living your best life. It's not fair. It's not fair. And he says to me, don't blame us. None of us are getting in the way of you pursuing your dreams. That's your own fear. And I was like, I'm going to divorce you. That's it. But it was true. Because at the end of the day, like, I have a partner, he's not a machista. Like, he's the one who does all the cooking, was always like very helpful in terms of taking care of the kids. Did he have moments where like I had to ask explicitly for help? But I think that had to do more with like, I always wanted things done my way. And he was like, well, if you want me to do it, is it okay if I do it my way? And then I'd be like, no. So there was that dynamic for a while, but it was just like my own fear of failure, my fear of being a beginner, really, and the vulnerability that comes with being a beginner. And we go to marriage counseling, so that, that was helping us. And then I decided, like, I'm going to hire Cato Carmen. And I started like self-coaching, and there's that's like a thing in the coaching world. There's someone called Brooke Castillo, and she has like the self-coaching model. And I just really used that, plus a lot of other journaling exercises, to become very aware of my own thoughts. And it became a practice that I wake up and I write down what I'm thinking and I audit my thoughts. And I'm like, which of these thoughts serve me? And which of these thoughts do I need to like get cute and curious with, so that they don't stay with me forever? And I still do that all the time. But it was that work of consistently looking at my thinking and deciding, like, I'm only going to repeat to myself the thoughts that serve me, that allowed me to break through that, beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, it does require like that level of self-awareness, right? And so I think when you get into the coaching space, you get into the personal development space, it makes you aware of the patterns, the thoughts, the ways that we can self-sabotage just with the narratives that we have going on in our head. And that self-awareness is such a key, like, part of that beginning transformation phase of just understanding, oh shit, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is not serving me. How can I do something different? Okay. Obviously, one of the objections that we both hear as coaches now, especially I think when talking to parents, is this almost guilt of or a fear of taking the risk with your money, right? So you took a risk to start a business. You didn't know if it was going to be successful. How do you get past that blockage that can be like, well, I'm afraid to try because I'm afraid to fail? Because there's so much riding on it, right? It's like one thing when you're like a single Pringle out here living your life 22 years old, you have no fucking cares in the world. It's another thing when you have a whole ass family that it's like, oh shit, like my success is riding on all of us.
And the thing is that you're not only afraid of losing your money. I think like the money is actually the least. It's about the time and the energy that you're going to have to spend quality time with your children, with your family. That are you going to be able to be fully present if other things are happening around you? And I think that it's a process. It's learning and like setting up these boundaries of like, this is when I work. This is when I'm hanging out with my family, with my kids. And what helped me a lot is that I do have a supportive partner. My kids, like I remember when my kids started like, at school when they do like their hero projects and they started saying like, they don't even call me, like they won't even say Soledad. They'll say, my mom's well Para Todos. And like they'll like Google me in their classroom and be like, that's my mom. Whenever my kids saw me on YouTube for the first time, like my youngest one started to cry. It was like, I'm so proud of you, mama. And now that I have the podcast, they're just like, and so then I realized like, oh, like following my heart's desires and listening to the parts of me that are saying like, hey, I think you should do this is actually so good for my family and so good for like their joy and also like for my husband.
And for you.
Yeah. 100% for me. But my kids, like now, even then, they're so young and they're always. Recently, my kid created a shirt on Roblox because she was asking for money to buy like Roblox gift card. I said, no, I'm not giving you a Roblox gift card. I said, find your way. So she's selling products on Roblox and getting money through that. My other little one too was like, Mom, I started this business at school. And I was like, oh my goodness.
I freaking love that. That's incredible. And it reminds me of I want to say it was an Instagram reel where it was a daughter and a mom. And the daughter was basically talking about like, I see the lost dreams and hopes in my mom's eyes, like as an adult, like watching all of the sacrifice kind of manifest and become me. And I almost feel like I don't ever want my child to feel that burden of like my mom gave up her potential because she thought it was like the best thing to do. I want her to say, yo, my mom was out here fucking slaying. And like, I want to be just like her because she literally is a light. She is an example of like what is possible versus like the sacrifice that I think so many of us thought is the way to inspire your kids. I would say that your kids want to see you like the most fully expressed version of yourself. Like that's the best gift that you can give.
100%. And I think a lot of times as parents, like part of the reason why I never put my kids in swimming classes when they were little, because I was like, I am not going to spend time, money, or energy on things that they're not telling me that they want to do. They have to say that they want to do something. And then I'm going to be all in, stop the world to make sure that they have the resources to follow what they're passionate about. And what I realized when I first had my first child, there was a part of me that was like doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. So I was like putting my kid in music classes. I was doing all these things because I was like, that's what you're supposed to do to help like with their development. And then like I'm prioritizing all of that and not necessarily doing it from a place of like, this is what's good for them. This is what they want. This is what we want as a family. And I had to shift that. And I remember like, I used to tell my kid, like, you're going to grow up and you're going to be an astronaut. You're going to be an astronaut. And then one day I heard my tia asking my child, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my kid says, well, I haven't really been able to think about it. And she's like, oh, well, okay. Like, why? And she's like, well, my mom wants me to be an astronaut, but I think it's because she was never an astronaut. And I'm telling you, and I was just like, oh, I was like, that's not going to be the stories that I want my kids saying about me. Like, I just don't want that to be there. And so I had to start being like, if there's something that I'm saying my kids should do, what if I do it first? What if I just do it first and then lead by example?
No, that's so powerful, right? Because I think a lot of us can either relate with that experience of feeling like our parents are projecting their hopes and dreams on us, or we've witnessed other people in our circle who have had that same experience. And I think a lot of that happens with this pressure that we might feel to like pursue a certain degree or a certain career or some sort of status because A, our family couldn't do it, and B, it's like what success looks like, right? So there's just so much of these narratives that we as like woke millennials have to undo because we've been indoctrinated with a lot of things that are not necessarily serving us as individuals and then, as parents to the next generation. Okay. So I think traditional self care, especially when we're talking about geared towards moms, it's like find the time to like indulge in those things that make you feel rejuvenated, right? Like get the nails done, go to the spa, get the massage. Like you think about even the shit that people give moms for Mother's Day, a bunch of flowers, like go to dinner, blah, blah, blah. What does self care actually look like from your perspective for moms?
Yeah. So, my perspective, I think about self care in terms of 7 different areas. One, Dinero self care. Two, interpersonal self care, and that's like your relationships. Three, vocational self care, that has to do with making sure that you're not burning out at work. Four, emotional self care, that's supporting your mental health. Five, restorative body self care, supporting your physical health. Six, spiritual self-care, making sure that like you're connected with yourself and this higher like purpose that nurtures faith and trust. And then finally, environmental self-care. And I came up with this framework of these 7 types of self-care because I noticed that the clients that I was working with who were able to reach like huge goals in a short amount of time, like paying off $30,000 of debt in 6 months, that kind of stuff, they were engaging in at least 4 types of those self-care consistently. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, I just need a framework to help people kind of think about like, are you engaging in self-care? Do you have even a list of self-care activities? And are you also aware of like when you need to engage in comforting self-care versus self-care that helps you grow and expands your comfort zone? And it doesn't feel good immediately, but eventually it does. There should be a balance there. And you should, on most days, engage in more comforting self-care than growth self-care. And I found like some people would come to me and they were like, I want to do all the things, putting themselves in a lot of growth, and then they're burning out. And so it's really about like using this framework to be intentional about assessing and auditing, like how well can you take care of yourself in so many different ways. And I mean, I could literally talk about this forever. That's why I started the podcast, because it's also about learning different seasons in your life. As a parent right now with a newborn, self-care and what's available to you is going to look different than when your child starts school. And it's going to look different when they're a teenager, and it's going to look different when they are in college. And part of what we always have to be doing is learning how to take care of ourselves during different seasons of our lives with different circumstances. And that gets really hard. And I think the biggest problem is that so many of us will start to be like, this is life. Tired, exhausted is the way to be an adult. This is parenthood. Like this is how everyone else is. And we just start to accept that we're like, it's okay to be exhausted, overstimulated, drained, feeling a little hopeless, or also feeling stressed and anxious. Like we just allow that to be like, that's what life is, instead of thinking, wait, what can I do to consistently come back to my joy, to feel more peace and more calm? And for me, I think of that very intentionally. And sometimes it's just out of habit. I'm able to engage in the different forms of self-care naturally through my day. But during really stressful times, like the past 3 months, I have to like write out a plan of what are the ways that I'm going to engage in self-care. And I have to be intentional about engaging in lots of comforting self-care and also very selective about the growth self-care that I want to engage in during a season of my life. And I think that's how we do it in a way that like honors our wellness and we don't overwhelm ourselves and it becomes sustainable.
I love that perspective because when you first list out all of the different types of self-care, I think some people might be like, holy shit, like there ain't no way I'm going to be able to like optimize all these areas of my life. But I think it's so important to understand that different areas of your life have different capacities for like what you can dedicate to them at any given time. And like you mentioned, there's this seasonality to our lives where there's going to be times where you need to invest more time in, like, let's say you have financial goals, so that dinero self-care is going to be like primary number one. And maybe that's going to require you to start looking at the vocational, whereas like, is this job actually making this goal easier or harder? Right. So that constant reassessment, what does that reassessment process look like for you? Like, how often are you revisiting these different areas of your life?
In different contexts, I mean, like for me, I think annually, like what are the ways that I want to grow? And then I break that down to quarterly. And then I look at that monthly and then break it down to daily. And I like do like this mid-month check-in. And it's also like capacity, right? Because there are seasons of my life where it just feels a lot more natural. Like I'm just moving and taking care of myself and making sure I have my gym time. I check in with my budget. I'm hiring help to delegate more of my business. I'm having weekly dates with my girlfriends. Like there's different seasons. And I will say that right now I'm in a season of my life where I'm just like, I just moved to a different neighborhood. My kids are at a different school. We've had like environmental issues that impact some of my self-care practices, health issues that have impacted self-care practices. And so I'm navigating again, like, oh, okay, the way I engaged in self-care 3 months ago is kind of not as accessible to me now. And so I'm having to explore new ways. Recently, I just discovered that I love coloring and that coloring is like this wonderful form of emotional self-care for me. And it has made me realize like, oh yeah, so your like self-care journey, you're always going to be exploring new things to make sure that you're grounded, that you're peaceful and you're calm. And I think the biggest thing is that you have to always decide that you're going to make that commitment.
How do you keep that commitment to yourself, right? Because I think it's very easy to justify why you can't do it today. You don't have time. You don't have the support. You don't have the money. How do you honor that commitment to yourself so that you don't end up becoming resentful, exhausted, burnt out? Because that's inevitably what's going to happen, right?
I feel like this answer, people are going to hate it, but this is the truth.
The hard truth has to be swallowed sometimes.
The hard truth is I love myself so much. And I love what it feels like in my body when I'm calm, when I'm peaceful, when I'm like in my little trickster, vibes, where I'm waking up my kids singing. And when I don't take the time to do my journaling or do my prayers or walks or have my friend time, like I'm not that person. I show up being like, hurry up, you gotta get ready for school. Oh my goodness, I told you to put your backpack over there, versus like waking them up with a song and making everything playful. And even how I operate with my partner, or just the compassion and empathy that I have for other people, compared when I'm taking care of myself compared to when I'm like running on fumes, it's like night and day. And I love the version of myself that is funsies. And I want to just be funsies. And I know myself too well. I know myself too well to know like when I don't take that time to take care of myself, when I push myself, when I tell myself there's no time to do something, or I don't adjust my expectations or my schedule so that I can have time to take care of myself, then I'm just fighting with my partner. And then the household feels all like tense. And then, I'm not thinking about growing my business. Or for me, I just have so much evidence of what life looks like when I take care of myself compared to when I don't, that it's just like out of deep, deep love for myself, it has to be a priority.
I love that perspective. It really does help you like reframe why this is a non-negotiable. I had a recent, I guess, I don't know, meltdown, whatever you call it, where I felt like I was just doing mothering and business and nothing for me. And I talked to my partner about it and he's like, I'm here, like, but I also can't help you like do that. You need to ask for the help that you need. You need to tell me that you need XYZ time, but nobody's going to do that for you. And I was just like, I know, but like, it'd be so nice if you just like read my fucking mind and just did all, like, we're able to anticipate what I need. And I think it's just so unrealistic for you to expect anybody in your life to do that advocacy work for you. You need to just be okay with like saying what it is, saying what you need. And I think that's one of the areas where moms struggle the most. It's like if you ask for help, you're perceived as like less competent or you're selfish, like you mentioned, like taking the time for yourself. What do you have to say to people who are still like navigating that mindset where it's just like, I don't even know how to ask for help. So I'm struggling.
Yeah, asking for help can be challenging, but I want you to think about all the times you help others. And if you can reflect on how often you help others, then understand that you're worthy of that same support. One of my favorite things to do is just to speak my truth. And sometimes my truth is like, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm not sleeping well. And sometimes my truth is like, oh my God, I think I could do anything I put my mind to. I'm so helpful. Like it varies. But all of those parts of me are true. And the more that we speak our truth, then the more we're likely to get the support that we need. And I'll like even do this like on my Instagram stories. I'll share like something that I'm navigating and people will reach out. And sometimes and they're like, how can I support you? And I'm like, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't even think like how to answer that question right now. But if I send you this emoji with like the eyes that are spiraling, know that I'm like spiraling. And maybe you can respond saying, take a deep breath, go color, go for a walk. And I think that's the thing too, that it's like, it's hard to ask for help when we're seeing that other people are struggling too. Like some of the people who volunteer to support me, I'm like, dude, you're in the middle of a move. Your dad just died. Like your house just burned down. Like, how are you like offering support? And part of what I realize is that when I'm taking care of myself, then I assume everyone else is taking care of themselves too. And the people are only offering what they can give. And that's the key thing, that when we do take care of ourselves, then it becomes easier to ask for help because it's like, oh, it's not like I'm always asking for help because I'm being very intentional about what I sign up for in the first place. So it's like it's this balance of understanding, like one, just like you help others, people want to help you too. Like that's a fact. Two, is also understanding like, well, what can we do so that you need less help in the first place? What can we start to adjust? What expectations for yourself in terms of your schedule, in terms of your time, so that you don't feel so overwhelmed? Like I know for me, I decided like I only work 25 hours a week in the business. That's it. Everything that's going to happen has to happen within those 25 hours a week because I want to just have space to wake up, take my kids to school, come back and lay in bed, scroll on Instagram and not feel like, oh my goodness, I'm wasting time. Like, no, I'm laughing at all these reels. That's okay. Like, cause I have the time to do that. I want to go on walks. I want to, read books out in the sun. Like I want that for my life. And if you like got to think about what is it that you want and know that you should get it.
Absolutely. Okay. I love that. All right. Tell us about the podcast, the inspiration behind it, and what can folks come to expect when it comes to the conversations that you're having on the show?
A lot of stories. I think like I'm just in this place where I just want everyone, like I like to teach lessons embedded within a story. So we're talking about wellness, self-care, increasing your financial security. The goal is for everyone who listens to feel very inspired and also have the tools to get to the point where they can become work optional, but do it in a way that like is full of so much self-care. I want to teach you about self-care, and I want this to be like your regular Sunday ritual. You listen to your Quiero, Dinero podcast, and then right after you're going to listen to Wealth Para Todos. And like you're going to go on a walk, you're going to go to the gym, you're going to have that full time to really ground yourself in the reminder of like, you are so worthy of your own love and your own attention and your own time, even though we live in this like cis hetero patriarchal capitalist world that is going to tell you, no, keep working.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I have been working to dismantle now for many years is this perception that your value as a woman, as a human, as a mom just comes from like your ability to do, your ability to produce, your ability to show up, be there. I think one of the most powerful things that I've experienced with financial independence is you just get to exist. you don't have to always be doing some shit. You don't always have to be working on productivity and achieving a goal. Like you can actually just be. And I think that is one of the most powerful whys to hold on to when you're thinking about what are the benefits of pursuing financial independence, because it's not easy. It's not easy to make the sacrifices when it comes to your money and investing and the risk that comes with that and potentially starting a business and just kind of doing things that other people aren't doing. But I think that end result of understanding that it can give you more time with the people you care about. It can give you more space to pour back into yourself. It can help you show up better for your community. It can give you resources that you can use to literally change the world because you're not out here fucking struggling to survive. That's a powerful place for us to be. And I think like when enough people of color, women, and especially moms, when moms are rich, like the world will inevitably change for the better.
100%. I think about like when we increased our financial security and the school was like, oh, parents, we need you to do this fundraiser so that we can take the kids on a field trip. And I was like, how much money do you need for the bus? And it was like $1,000. And I thought, if I'm really feeling really busy right now, then I know other people are feeling really busy. And my husband just was like, let's take $1,000 from our loved one emergency fund and pay for the bus. And that now is just part of our like budget. Like we will, because like, nope, no one's fundraising. We got this, everybody. Everyone keep doing what you got to do. And that's like the power of taking care of yourself so that you actually have the capacity to engage in like this wealth building cycle. And then you get to just give from a place of abundance, not from a place of fear, from anxiety or nervousness, but from a place of like, I got you. I got you. And I got you without sacrificing myself.
Absolutely. That's the most important part. Soledad, thank you so much for being here. Let folks know where they can find you and where we can get all of your magic and how you work with people.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody, if you liked what you heard, make sure you let me know on Instagram. Send me a DM. Let us know that you listened to this podcast episode. And you can find me at wealthparatodos.com. That is my website. I'm also on Instagram and Threads. And I mean, I have a profile on LinkedIn, but I'm not really there. So really find me on Instagram. Get on my email list. I have a weekly Todo con Tiempo, Tuesday and Thursdays. I send out emails again about wellness and financial security and doing it in a way that really honors your wellness. And we've said this a million times, but listen to the podcast. Wealth para Todos everywhere.
Wealth para Todos everywhere. We're going to make sure to link all of those resources in the episode show notes. Make sure to follow and subscribe Soledad. She is a refreshing and much needed voice in the world of personal finance. You're not going to find any of this toxic bro culture over there. You're going to find actual, actionable resources, guides, and tips that are really going to help you look at personal finance, not just from the money perspective, but from the holistic perspective. So thank you so much for being here. And until next time, y'all, stay poderosa.